Hi all. I thought I'd finish the year with a look back at 2020, the year that was, and how we coped. When we first heard of this new coronavirus, COVID-19, we weren't overly concerned. After all, the world had coped with new virus outbreaks before, SARS, Ebola, but it didn't take long to realise that COVID-19 was a different ballgame. This one came knocking on our doors, moving so fast among us that the entire globe was basically shut down. A phenomena that no one had ever seen in our lifetime. Loved ones were dying alone in ICU beds. Families were cut off from each other. Yes, 2020 has been a dark and difficult year. But it hasn't been all doom and gloom. COVID managed to hold a mirror up to ourselves, showing us the very worst in our society, but also the very best. It sent us to our rooms to think about our lives and our priorities. It reminded us of what is important and what is not. Here's a look back on how Australia coped, with footage courtesy of the ABC. I'll finish off with a clip of children from all across the country singing Auld Lang Syne. That's me for this year, as I thankfully spend time with my loved ones. I'll be back in the new year with many more uploads for you to enjoy. Wishing you all a merry, thankful Christmas and a much brighter 2021.
China has said that an outbreak of an unknown viral pneumonia is not the respiratory disease SARS.
The University of Hong Kong says it's likely a brand new viral pneumonia.
Experts reportedly found a new coronavirus that traces back to the outbreak that we are seeing in Wuhan. And
so far, 59 people have been infected with the virus.
Like most people, I can recall seeing small articles in the newspaper around this pandemic that was potentially breaking out in Wuhan.
New viral pneumonia in China is on the move.
While the Chinese government says it's spreading from animal to humans, scientists here say human-to-human transmission can't be ruled out.
China says the number of people infected by a mysterious respiratory virus has more than tripled over the weekend. There are now 218 confirmed cases of the new coronavirus.
It sounded like something that would probably stay away and be a low-grade sort of episode, something that people would struggle to remember a couple of years from now.
Ground zero for this mysterious virus, and it's also showing up in other cities as well as Japan, Thailand, and South Korea. The concern, of course, how to stop it from spreading.
More than 400 people have been infected with the coronavirus and 9 people have died.
Wuhan is in virtual lockdown. In this city of 11 million people, you're not allowed to enter any public space without a mask.
26 people have died so far after contracting the virus, which attacks the respiratory system. All of those deaths have been in China, mostly in and around Wuhan, but now there have been 2 deaths outside Hubei province. The World Health Organization has said it doesn't yet consider it to be a global health emergency.
Definitely in my mind there was concern and a small closed group of people that I'm in touch with that monitor these things, you know, and have done through our careers.
I spent 3 days in hospital in the early stages of COVID, and I can tell you the anxiety levels there were extraordinary. The healthcare workers were really concerned about what might lie ahead. They took all the necessary precautions, but they knew in the backs of their minds they were putting themselves at risk. But they did it anyway. You've really got to admire the way that healthcare workers in this country just rallied around and did what they had to do.
It's about 4 a.m. and I'm recording my first video diary.
And this is my first video diary. I'm going to be just documenting a few little videos.
How do I feel right now? I feel really scared, basically.
It's going to disappear. One day it's like a miracle, it will disappear.
We believe that the risk of a global pandemic is very much upon us, and as a result, as a government, we need to take the steps necessary to prepare for such a pandemic.
I think it was important declaring the pandemic early, and unfortunately the WHO has been slow in every single important new bit of information compared to the scientific community. Scott Morrison called it and he was right. What happened in March is the most significant moment in the pandemic control in Australia.
In March, I think Australia was really gripped by this fear of what this could become, and we saw it in the seriousness with which our political leaders took the situation.
What's down here?
Down here, there are masks, nappies, toilet paper. I've also got some seeds, just in case there's an interruption to the fresh food supply chain.
The Prime Minister announced a few days ahead of time that restrictions were necessary. And then he said,
I'm going to the footy this weekend, I'm looking forward to it.
Well, that sent the wrong message to all Australians.
I don't think anyone really grasped how severe this was going to get and how serious it was going to get. And I think all of us kind of probably clung to that desire to just live our normal lives.
We will close our border.
A travel ban will be placed on all non-residents.
More than 3 billion people in almost 70 countries and territories have been asked to stay at home.
Didn't check passports or anything, didn't ask any fevers or any health checks or that, it was just straight on down.
In the middle of this crisis, where the most obvious problem was this virus, the Ruby Princess chugs into Sydney Harbour full of sick people, all of whom are allowed to disembark and fan out across airports. It's just absolutely extraordinary.
They were herded off the Ruby Princess like cattle. Passports were not checked, ID cards were not checked.
I found it was very frightening because I thought one lady on the ship had died, and that upset me, and I thought, well dear, I don't want to be the next one.
Children should go to school tomorrow. There is no change to the medical expert advice.
For practical reasons, we are encouraging parents to keep their students at home.
Bring forward the school holidays.
I don't think there's any doubt in retrospect that had the federal government been left to its own resources, then the restrictions wouldn't have been as tight.
Businesses will close because of the restrictions we have put in place.
Those images of people queuing around the block at every Centrelink in Australia were massively attention-focusing for the government, I think.
My name's Jennifer. I'm a recently qualified medical oncologist. I feel like I'm standing on a beach along with everyone else, watching the tsunami roll in, and just so unsure of what it's going to look like or feel like in the next couple of weeks, let alone months. I've just put my hand up to do some clinical work as backup for when this happens.
I shook hands with everybody, you'll be pleased to know, and I continue to shake hands.
British Prime Minister Boris Johnson has now been admitted to the hospital. He has symptoms of coronavirus.
Mass graves for an unprecedented crisis. This is America.
We're continuing to study this virus every moment of every day.
In the name of Jesus, we thank you.
I see the disinfectant where it knocks it out in a minute, 1 minute. And is there a way we can do something like that by injection inside or?
Hi, my name is Luke Delarue. I'm an emergency medicine registrar at the Royal Melbourne Hospital. At the moment, there are no patients waiting, which is actually pretty rare for 4 a.m. in the morning, believe it or not. Clearly, people are paying attention and staying at home.
Another week in the COVID pandemic diary. I've just finished a stint working as a locum as an oncologist, which has been quite interesting. Each time you feel a tickle in your throat or need to sneeze, you're terrified that you might infect your patients.
My name's Bridget and I'm an intensive care nurse at the Alfred Hospital. I've been working in the COVID pod today. It's a strange place to work. You walk in there and everyone's in their gowns and their masks and their goggles and you don't recognise people, and it's like being on a different planet, really.
One of these procedures is putting breathing tubes in COVID positive patients. It's not a very nice thing to do when a patient's awake and you've got to take over their breathing for them because they need that oxygen so badly and they're not getting it. Usually I'm able to switch off after shifts, but the last couple of days I haven't been sleeping great.
I've been working in the COVID area in the ICU. We've had some patients in for 2-3 week stints and have had no relative contact.
I guess the biggest change we've noticed is there's been a huge amount of drug and alcohol related presentations. We've been battling that for the last few nights. That's been a big change, and I think that's a reflection of the fact that, you know, people are struggling with the social isolation and self-medicating.
Coronavirus pandemic has claimed now more than 100,000 lives in America.
This will become another ICU. You can see it's super creepy to be walking around here. The isolation rules sort of lifting in the next couple of days. I'm a bit nervous about people going back to work and having social gatherings again.
I'm up in Toowoomba at my other job, just getting ready to go and pick up a patient, working the helicopter this week. The airport is properly deserted. I've never really seen it like this before. There's no one around really at all. I had a close contact with a colleague who has subsequently tested positive for coronavirus after we worked together on my last couple of night shifts, and so that means I'm out.
In Melbourne, I think the second wave happened because of a combination of bad management and bad luck. Private security guards were used at hotel quarantine. And then once the outbreak happened, Victoria didn't have the same capability that 2 or 3 of the other states had. That is, they weren't able to contain it.
Many countries that believed they were past the worst are now grappling with new outbreaks.
We've gone from discharging our last COVID patient back home to be with their family to seeing triple-digit numbers in new cases in Victoria. I think everyone's feeling quite on edge for what is to come. I think there's going to be a lot of very burnt out people in the next couple of months if this turns into be another big wave. The numbers are worse than we ever would have imagined them being at this point. The staff morale is really low, and I know people were more scared at work than what they've been in the past.
9 public housing towers in those postcodes will be the subject of a complete lockdown, effective immediately.
I realised that we're in complete lockdown, as in we can't go out for exercise, can't go out for work, we can't go get groceries and any essentials either. You can see police presence on every access point. It's scary. It is traumatic.
And I live here. You're
go inside and sleep in your building.
You have no right and authority to tell me what to do and what not to do.
You can see cops everywhere. There are every exit point, every entrance point, just patrolling the area.
I understand the intentions behind it, but the way it was gone about was completely wrong. We should have had a heads up and warning.
I think at the time the Victorian government, they knew the situation was serious. They'd already tried a lot of things like taking testing out to local communities, vans and so on. If everything else is failing, that's a last resort, is to lock down.
275 new cases since our last update.
374 new cases, 484, that's 403 new cases since we last reported, 300 new cases. That's 357 new since we last updated you. 8,696 coronavirus cases in Victoria, that's 532 new. That is an increase of 384. First things first, there are 9,998 cumulative cases of coronavirus in the Victorian community, 723 new since we last updated you.
It's felt like just holding your breath every day, a constant state of anxiety, waiting for those numbers to come out in the morning and just praying that, you know, we're going to go back to normal relatively soon.
You will no longer be able to leave home or go any further away from your home than a 5-kilometre radius. There will be a curfew across metropolitan Melbourne from 8 p.m. this evening.
Except for Antarctica, infections have been reported on all continents.
This week we will reach 20 million registered cases of COVID-19 and 750,000 deaths.
Today they announced that we have to go into stage 4 lockdown. I've had a lot of staff members who have tested positive, colleagues who have been off sick, colleagues that have ended up in hospital. I have a colleague at the moment who's intubated in an ICU. Still seeing some pretty frustrating stuff at work, so I've just done a run of 4 nights. You know, we had to look after someone who had a blood alcohol of 0.5 after being out after curfew, at a party.
Things definitely look like they're amping up now. Reports of Melbourne are getting really scary, especially hearing about doctors in intensive care following swabbing patients. It's also feeling a lot more real with all wearing masks both in and out of the hospital. Yeah, definitely feeling like we're on the edge of the knife at the moment.
I'm finding it pretty tricky to completely switch off from work, that I'm almost feeling a little bit guilty for having days off.
I've just done a big 12-hour shift. I guess the one thing I wanted to quickly comment on is we've got a few COVID positives in, but they seem to be a lot sicker than earlier on in the year. I'm on paternity leave at the moment, just had a baby on Wednesday, but we haven't had access. I haven't been able to go and see my wife or newborn daughter. Been hanging out with this little fella, and yeah, it's been a bit challenging.
This has to be the biggest public policy failure by a state government in living memory.
I've never seen Melbourne like this before. I mean, just, you know, we walk the dog, there's no one around, there's no cars around.
Seeing those extraordinary images of Melbourne totally shut down was eerie. It was almost biblical. Nothing was moving.
Across the country, nursing home residents account for almost 60% of coronavirus deaths, amongst the worst in the world.
We need to understand that putting people in isolation has detrimental effects all of its own.
Like my mother-in-law who passed a few years ago would say, you know, look after the grand Shane. We built this country, you know. And we owe them better. I need to go.
The cracks in our aged care system just showed up so clearly. 685 aged care residents died, and we were forced to see the weaknesses in our aged care system, where underpaid workers struggle to cope with an overload of work.
Mr. Speaker, this is a devastating day for Australia.
Can the Prime Minister confirm that Australia has plunged into the worst recession in almost a century?
These are the darkest economic times since the Great Depression.
It has crossed my mind that maybe at this age I won't be able to get another job.
I guess I'm afraid that I'm not really going to be able to get
full-time work and that it's going to be a struggle. It's been a year of a lot of highs and lowest lows, kind of. You have the all in between.
It's still spreading. That's what worries me.
And we're developing a vaccine in record time. It will be ready before the end of the year.
Feeling pretty burnt out, actually. Nothing really to do outside of work, nothing to kind of, help you relax, can't go to the pub or catch up with mates, so that's, I find that kind of challenging. Plus, I'm supposed to get married in a couple of months and I've had to delay that. I was supposed to be in Queensland, so can't even go to the supermarket at the moment. Actually bleeding from the nose today, which is new and annoying.
That's 76 new cases since yesterday. That's 43 new cases since yesterday. That's just 12 new cases since my report yesterday.
So I've come into work tonight and this COVID pod is almost completely empty.
We're almost at the end of stage 4 lockdown in Melbourne. We've got community transmission on the downtrend and very few new cases daily. Not being able to interact with patients in the way that you normally would. Often a smile, some reassurance, underneath all that PPE is really hard. We're going to establish this new COVID norm that everyone keeps talking about. The idea of having to wear all of that crap every day is really hard. I'm tired, I need a holiday. I've got a holiday coming up. Hopefully I'll be able to go somewhere more than 5 kilometres from my house. Hopefully I'll be able to see some family and friends that I haven't seen for months. We're a very, very fortunate country. We weren't put in a position where people were choosing who gets a ventilator and not, and who doesn't. That's really something to be proud of.
In the last few minutes, it's been confirmed by President Trump that he and his wife have tested positive for coronavirus.
Germany, Spain, Italy, all living under tighter restrictions this morning.
There are 0 new cases across our state. The last time we recorded 0 cases was 139 days ago. We are able to say that now is the time to open up.
I think unless you've lived through it, you really don't understand how we've been impacted.
I've got a daughter and a grandson who lives in Ballarat. We've missed them dearly. See my daughter, see my grandson, and yeah, look, it was a relief, not as much as we expected, but it will come and it will happen.
The biggest thing I would remember the year for is having to be adaptable. Applying for jobs, I don't even know the number that I would have applied for. It's probably upwards of 50, I would say. I've pretty much been applying everywhere.
My 2020 has been a bit of an emotional roller coaster.
Oh, not being able to see the grandkids was the worst bit about 2020. That was pretty awful. It was only a short time, but it was long enough.
My family was dealing pretty badly with it. My dad was unemployed the whole time, and it was a kind of a bad time, but it's looking up now.
I will always remember the 66 patients that passed. Personally, I'm physically tired. Sometimes I feel so tired to the point of exhaustion. I'm emotionally tired, and I think I'm psychologically tired. And it has been traumatic.
I often reflect and think back on the families, particularly of those patients that we lost that died because of COVID. There were some really distressing stories and family situations that we saw. I think our lives in healthcare have irrevocably changed because of this pandemic.
the streets that we all, oh sorry, I am crying now. We all took on these really, you know, pretty hard rules to live by, and we were doing it for each other.
I think we started to understand how much we take for granted. The ability to visit each other, the ability to hug each other, the ability to come together when we want to, and to come home when we want to. And the best part of the concluding parts of this year was the ability to touch each other again.
The best bits throughout 2020 would be reconnecting with friends, reconnecting with family, being able to see them again.
Come on, Victoria, you've got this!
We love you and miss you so much, I can't believe it.
Oh, that's some chockies for the hospital.
A city is ugly without people in it, it's hideous.
Next year I hope that for the rest of the world that we can get on top of COVID.
I have a lot of hopes for 2021 that we'll come back stronger and more connected.
What I hope for 2021 is we keep building relationships and friendships with people we might not have known before.
Well done, well done.
acquaintance be forgot for all lang syne. For all lang syne, my dear, for all lang syne, we'll take a cup of kindness yet for all lang syne. We two were paddled in the stream from morning sun to dawn, but it seems between us more and broad since all lang syne. For all lang syne, my dear, for all lang syne, we'll take a cup of kindness yet for all lang syne. I'm grateful that I get to go to great school, 'cause I could make new friends. And